Our next speaker, and the first to kick off our afternoon program, is Neil Chatterjee, former chair of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. He's now a senior advisor at Hogan Lovells. There's a very amazing biography which you can read, but we're not going to take time to tell you all of the wonderful things he's done. But Neil, why don't you take it away and give us your perspective on where we are now and where we're headed?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to address you all virtually today. As I reflect upon my tenure at FERC, I got to address this audience on multiple occasions in person, and it was always a wonderful event. And I do hope that we're getting closer and closer to returning to pre-pandemic normalcy, because I really do miss the engagements, both pre and post remarks at forums like this. But it's an honor to be back speaking with you all again. I think it might be instructive from my point of view, before I sort of give my perspective on where we are and where things are going, to just sort of give some reflections about my time at FERC, the issues that we confronted, and where I think things will go from here. One of the things that was so interesting to me that I didn't anticipate when I took my seat at a domestic energy regulator was the opportunities that would emerge in the international and foreign policy arena. I had initially thought maybe because the commission was responsible for evaluating applications for liquefied natural gas export facilities, that there might be some international engagement in terms of assuring Americans that there was a offtake and a need and a demand for the projects that we were evaluating before we made a decision on domestic construction. What I was so interested and pleased to find out is that our allies around the world pay very close attention to U.S. power markets. And despite the struggles that we have here domestically and sometimes our own internal criticism of our energy infrastructure and grid, our grid is the envy of the world. And our allies want to learn from us about what we have done in our 2-decade-plus experiments with markets in particular, to see how we've been able to successfully deliver clean, reliable, affordable energy to Americans consistently while squeezing carbon out of the U.S. power sector. And I was very impressed to find our allies were paying close attention to this and wanted to learn from us. And at FERC, we had the foremost expertise in the world on these complicated matters. And so I was proud to enter into a number of MOUs with allies around the world, from Asia to Latin America to Africa, and teaching folks about power markets and what we have learned and the struggles that we have had with capacity, with energy, with ancillary services, and how we've had to make iterative changes to keep pace with innovation and technology and change. And so that sort of experience was really foundational to my time at FERC. And I'm happy to kind of talk about it today to sort of build upon it, because it's not just the U.S. that is undergoing this exciting energy transition, but it's our allies around the world. But these are really, really complicated issues. And since I've left the commission, and I've had the opportunity to reflect and view the complex challenges we all face from another side of the table, it's been just really interesting for me to see how the energy landscape is shifting, both domestically here in the U.S. and internationally. Look, I'm someone who made very clear after I took my seat at FERC that I believe climate change is real, that man has a significant impact, and that we urgently need to take steps to mitigate emissions, but that I wasn't in favor of sort of overreaching regulations, a command and control approach, or subsidies or mandates, and that I really favored market-based solutions to decarbonization. And that was sort of a central focus of my tenure at FERC, and it's something I hope to build upon in my post-FERC tenure. And it's something that I'm seeing, firsthand right now, that while Americans are faced with tremendous benefits and opportunities from the energy transition, in certain sectors, there are folks who want to skip the transition part of the energy transition. And that has led, I think, in some instances, to our taking our eyes off of reliability and affordability, as well as energy security. And that's what I thought I would focus my remarks on today. I'll start where I began, talking about the role that U.S. LNG can play in the international marketplace. When I first arrived at FERC, I was really concerned that the U.S. would miss this incredible opportunity to really establish itself as a net exporter of energy. When I first came to Washington in the early 2000s and was working on energy policy in the Congress, we were talking about building LNG import facilities in the U.S. We thought we would be forever a net importer of LNG. It was a really exciting opportunity to find that for the first time in almost 6 decades, the U.S. could be a net exporter of energy. But I was worried that FERC would become a bottleneck in that process. And so we worked really hard, entered into an MOU with PHMSA, opened an office in Houston, tried to eliminate duplicative regulations and streamline our process, and then arrived at a bipartisan deal with myself, one of my Republican colleagues, and one of my Democratic colleagues to address the direct GHG impacts of the LNG export facilities we were evaluating, and wound up approving, I believe it was 14 total facilities during my tenure as a chairman and commissioner at FERC. And it's something that I was really proud of. And I feel more strongly about it than ever, as what we are seeing occur with this absolute travesty, this humanitarian crisis in the Ukraine, it's really being driven by energy. While this has somewhat shocked our psyches here in the U.S., I will tell you that our allies abroad were not surprised by this. I actually went to Eastern Europe in late 2019, right before the world melted down, and met with my counterparts in the Czech Republic and Hungary and Poland. And they were expressing concerns back then about Putin and Russia and what the implications would be for Europe's dependence on Russian gas. There's been so much focus in the aftermath of Putin's invasion on Russian oil and the role it plays in Russia's economic strength. But Russia's political dominance over Western Europe really comes over gas and their control of the gas supply necessary to maintain reliability and energy security in Europe, particularly in Germany. And I think a lot of Americans have awoken now to the role that U.S. LNG can play, not just domestically here in the U.S., creating jobs and leading to economic growth, not just geopolitically giving our allies an alternative to Russian gas, but also environmentally. Clean U.S. LNG displacing dirty Russian gas will have a positive impact on lowering global carbon emissions. This was something that was central to the case I was making throughout my tenure at FERC, and I think it's more relevant than ever today. And I do think the situation in Europe, the crisis in Ukraine, has fundamentally altered global politics around gas and the energy transition, as well as here domestically. I think Americans want to help our European allies. I think Americans are awakening to the importance of energy security and want to make sure that we are in a position to maintain a reliable and secure energy here at home domestically. And so I do think you're going to see a shift in the political landscape. We still need to focus on decarbonization. Don't get me wrong. I am not talking in any way about slowing the energy transition or moving away from a focus on decarbonization, but we need to do it in a smarter way, in a less political way, more focused on liability and security online with decarbonization. I think we've been prioritizing decarbonization and have taken our eyes off of reliability and security. And that potentially could be to our detriment. And we could see that as early as this summer, where certain experts are forecasting potential energy and electricity shortfalls in certain regions. And so I do think it is going to refocus Americans on this idea about reliability and security online with decarbonization. So I want to talk about some of the policy implications, particularly at FERC and elsewhere, that have been thrust into the middle of this broader global energy and policy and political debate. And the timing was most unfortunate. So during my tenure at FERC, some of the biggest controversies we had were over the Commission's approach to the evaluation and certification of natural gas pipelines. From the beginning, there was a clear difference of opinion between myself and my Republican colleagues, and then Commissioner, now Chairman Glick, and we wrestled back and forth. Former Chairman McIntyre had reopened the 99 certificate policy statement, something that I supported. And we had hoped to find consensus, to find a way to make that process more efficient, while acknowledging some of the concerns that Commissioner Glick and Commissioner LaFleur and others had been raising. We were unable to achieve that consensus. During my time as chair, I made clear that I felt that for a policy statement to have any value, it should have input from all 5 commissioners and be unanimous. I actually, ironically, sadly, throughout the 2.5 years that I chaired the commission, I never had a full 5 commission complement in which to take action. But it was something that we wrestled with in individual cases and the like over the years. I tried to be pragmatic. While I stood by the approach the commission took during my tenure as chair, when after the 2021 election, when Commissioner Glick became Chairman Glick, and I stayed on the commission as a commissioner, I tried to be constructive and work with my colleagues on a bipartisan basis. That despite the fact that I stood by the approach we had taken, I felt that I wanted projects to move forward, and I wanted to find a path forward, in a pragmatic way to address some of the concerns that my Democratic colleagues had. And so on a particular case, Northern Natural, I worked on a bipartisan agreement with my 2 colleagues to sort of take a step forward on some of the questions that they had risen. I took a lot of flack for my participation in that case, but I thought that it was the right thing to do, because what I understood, having been both a chair and a commissioner, was that while on the Federal Power Act side, items that are deadlocked can go into effect by operation of law. When it comes to the Natural Gas Act, there is no similar such provision. So if the chair of FERC, if he or she does not approve of the manner in which an order approving a pipeline is drafted, he or she can essentially have a pocket veto and sit on them in perpetuity. And I didn't want that. And so I tried to move forward. And I was really disappointed when in February, as Putin was amassing troops on the border, FERC put out 2 policy statements that I thought went significantly further than what was within the commission's authority and well beyond the compromise that I had tried to broker during my tenure. I was pleased to see the commission pull back.
The questions for Neil here, and then on to after Neil, Dane, Dorman on the next page.
I do think that process will continue to play out over the coming months, and we need to see. I would like to see bipartisan consensus. I was very encouraged to see Chairman Glick at the last open meeting state that his hope and intention was to move forward with policy statements that either had unanimous support or at a bare minimum a supermajority. And I think that is a very positive sign, because when it comes to something as significant as how FERC will evaluate pipeline applications, for it to be durable, I think it has to be bipartisan. And so I'm optimistic that the commission will move in that direction. I want to focus a little bit on the power sector very quickly, as I know I'm coming up on time and would like to be able to respond to questions. Look, there's some exciting opportunities in the power sector. I was proud of a couple of initiatives, FERC Order 841 and 2222, that remove barriers to entry to innovative new technologies like storage and aggregated distributed energy resources. But we continue to see our grids tested in different regions. In the last 1.5 years, we saw Texas's grid pushed to the brink by an unexpected cold weather event. We saw California's grid pushed to the brink by extreme heat and wildfires. And it's just a reality that extreme weather and climate change are going to continue to test our grid. But we have to also ensure that while we move to decarbonize, we're maintaining reliability. And what I'm seeing more and more is, unfortunately, the engineers and the economists and lawyers are being removed from the process, and more decisions about our resource mix and resource adequacy are being made by politicians. And what we're finding is certain generators are being retired prematurely based on political reasons before the balancing resources are in place to shore up that needed and necessary capacity. And so I am worried heading into the summer months in certain regions. We may see electricity shortfalls, and that's something that we all need to be cognizant of. But I am optimistic that the tools are in place, that FERC, working with NERC, the staff will work vigorously to work with the grid operators to ensure that we can maintain reliability through the summer. But longer term, we've got to get serious And people ask me, so Neil, you're a Republican, you're from Kentucky, you're out there talking about the need to address climate change, but nothing seems to happen. What is your solution? How are we going to move forward in America and around the world? And my answer, and I've been saying this, and I don't mean this to be funny, is we need to make energy policy boring again. When energy policy is boring and you let the engineers and the lawyers sort it out, you get constructive outcomes. And so I really mean it when I say I want to take the politics out of energy policy, make it boring again. There was a time when climate change in particular was not political. It was a technical issue. It's unfortunate that it's become politicized. I am hoping we can put that genie back in the bottle. Maybe I'm being Pollyannishly naive about it, but I do think a conversation around reliability, energy security, and decarbonization is a bipartisan one. It's an important one, and it's one I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have going forward. So I've been filibustering for about 16 minutes now. I think I have about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to file cloture on myself, yield back what time I have remaining, and open it up to any questions you guys may have. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Neil. What would you say is your single biggest contribution to the legacy you left at FERC? What is really your legacy? What would you like to be enshrined?
It's a complex legacy. Look, I've been very public that when I started my tenure at the commission, I struggled to make the transition from partisan legislative aid to independent regulator, particularly around matters with the DOE grid resilience, NOPR. I just spent a decade of my career at the side of Leader McConnell advocating on behalf of coal communities, and I didn't handle it well when I came to FERC and dealt with this significant power market ruling that ultimately I voted the right way, but in the manner in which I comported myself, I regret it. But I think I learned from that experience and I matured in the role. And I learned a lot from Chairman McIntyre, and sadly had to step back into the role as chair under the worst possible circumstances. But I'm proud of the work my team and I did and the staff at FERC going forward from there. We really tried to move energy policy forward and better align it with the realities of the 21st century marketplace in an independent way. There were some major rulings like modernizing PURPA, approving necessary energy infrastructure, achieving some stability around FERC's ROE methodology that I did with my Republican colleagues. And there were some big things like Order 841 on battery storage that are referred to most significantly, and one of the things I'm proudest of, and what I think could be one of the most significant orders ever issued by FERC, FERC Order 2222, did that with my Democratic colleagues, and ultimately putting out a policy statement, laying out a path forward for the possibility of FERC making a just and reasonable determination on a price on carbon in FERC jurisdictional markets. I did with my Democratic colleague. And so I was really proud that we were able to accomplish such significant things in an independent way that I think will have some durability. Will there be challenges? Obviously, some of the power market issues we dealt with in PJM and ISO New England and in New York, the commission is going to continue to wrestle into the future. But I think the groundwork we laid on infrastructure, I think we cleared the decks for Chairman Glick and my former colleagues to move forward on transmission, which I think is very necessary, and I applaud them for their efforts there. And I'm really looking forward to see what impact 2222, 841, PURPA reform, and the like will have in the future. We accomplished a lot. I really feel like it was a significant tenure. I'm proud of the legacy we left behind.
Well, thank you so much, Neil. It's been delightful to have you. Your positive outlook, your dogged pursuit of outcomes you believe are in the public interest is whether there's agreement or disagreement. That's what the FERC is designed for, is to err and to come to conclusions regarding different perspectives. But you've left a legacy of having worked unbelievably hard and have left a lot of good things behind. And I know that you're pursuing in the international and domestic arenas many more opportunities that will continue on that legacy. So thank you so much, Neil. We appreciate your efforts, and we appreciate you joining us today. You honor us with your presence. Thank you so much, Neil.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.